If you have an evergreen webinar or pre-recorded webinar, you probably know that automations run the world. And without them, you would be chained to your desk pretty much 24/7. So in this video, we're going to talk about 3 automations that you maybe aren't using inside your evergreen webinar funnel that will boost your ICA engagement and make life easier for you as a CEO. But first, hey, I'm Kylie. I am one half of the Funnel Flippers. We talk about all things ethical marketing, evergreen funnel strategies, and taking your live launch funnel into an evergreen funnel without compromising conversions. If you like that, hit the follow button below. So I'm going to back it up. We're going to start at the beginning. What is a webinar/evergreen webinar? So a webinar is essentially a lecture, like a college lecture, where you are speaking to your audience about a topic that you are an expert in and are teaching them some things. So inside an evergreen webinar, the only difference is you're not there live on Zoom with them. So this doesn't require you to block out time in your calendar because you already have the content. And now it's an on-demand version where people can register for that and watch it as they wish, instead of having to also put time on their calendar to join you live via Zoom, Facebook Live, or wherever you like to present. So automations are quite literally a way to automate the processes that you're already doing, but instead you're utilizing your software to do it for you so that you don't have to do it yourself, have your VA do it, or OBM, or anybody else in your team. So inside evergreen webinar funnels, there are a ton of automations, but possibly one of the most important, and the first one we're going to talk about, is the onboarding or confirmation automation. This is going to be where you say, hey, you've officially registered. Here is how you can access the content, and here's some other things you might need to know. So with this automation, usually what's going to happen is you're going to have a registration page. It'll have a form on it where you'll ask for name, email, and whatever other information you might need. Once they complete this form, they're going to be registered for your webinar. But inside the back end, the way this looks is you have a form. After they complete that form, I personally like to add a tag. If you're using something like ActiveCampaign, you can also add them to a list if that is your preference. But I would like to tag them with something that says webinar XYZ registrant. That way I know that, hey, they registered for my webinar, and I can quickly pull up all of the registrations if I need to. From that tag, I would use that as a trigger for an email and or a text message, depending on how you like to contact your audience. And I would use that to trigger that, hey, this is all the information you need in order to proceed and watch the content that you registered for. That email would include something like how they can watch your content. So how can they access it? That's the big one. They need to know how they can actually watch it. Number 2, I would also add any resources they might need. So whether this is a workbook you designed for the webinar, a bonus you promised with the webinar, or even free resources you have that supports what you're presenting inside of your webinar. I would add that in that email. And then lastly, I always include a way to reach out if they have questions. So include your support email if you want to do your personal email. Include something that they can reach out if they're having issues or just have a general question about the content you presented that they already watched or that they haven't watched yet. Okay. From there, I would also probably include a personal note a few days later. So add the tag, have that tag trigger an email. I would have that confirmation email deliver immediately. The one thing you don't want to do is have it wait like an hour and then they think, hey, my registration didn't go through, and then they keep trying it and eventually give up. So I would have your confirmation email deliver immediately. And then about 2 days later, I personally like to deliver a personal note. So say, hey, I really appreciate the fact you're here. I wanted to check in again to see if you had a chance to watch. Do you have any questions? Do you have any feedback? And what was your experience? Just very short and sweet personal note from you. You can even do it in video. Sometimes it's even a little better because then they can get that face-to-face time with you and feel like they're a little more connected. So that is your welcome automation, confirmation automation, whatever you want to call it. The second automation we're going to be diving into is very much starting to segment out the people within your webinar. So once we get through the welcome, they have the chance to either watch the webinar or not watch the webinar. We want to start to segment out this list into two groups. Those are going to be people who watched, people who did not watch. This is going to come in really handy because you're going to be able to start to segment further and further and further and really market to those people based on their journey that they're taking with you. So what you want to do for this, if you are using a webinar software, you can pretty easily hook up most CRMs, most funnel builders to do this for you. But you want to start to segment them either out into a list or add an additional tag between people who have watched it in any capacity at any amount and people who have not taken any action. If you are using just like a funnel builder or email platform with a video embedded on a landing page, what I would recommend to do is to add a tag based on a link click. So I would not probably add your video into the thank you page or the confirmation page after they submit the registration form when signing up. I would actually put a link to the video inside the confirmation email. The reason being, you can set up almost any software to add a tag or add to a list when a link is clicked within an email. This is going to let you know who's clicking onto it and who's not if you're not utilizing an actual webinar software that's going to provide you with that data. So if you are using a webinar software, you can either, if your CRM, funnel builder, etc., offers a direct connection, direct integration with your either Zoom, Webinar Jam, whatever you're using for your webinar, you can use that option. Or you can use Zapier to kind of export the data into a Google Sheet and then import that data into your CRM, funnel builder, etc., and add the appropriate tag at that time based on which category they fall into when you're exporting your data from your webinar service. So with all that said, essentially what we're doing here is we are just splitting out all of the people who watched, who did not watch, and we're going to start sending them content based on the actions they are or are not taking. So for all those people that did not take any action, they either didn't click your link, they're not watching the video, they took no action after they registered, I'd highly recommend setting up an email sequence of check-ins with them. So I would probably set the first one up for maybe 2 weeks, 30 days, whatever you prefer, to say, hey, I noticed you signed up for our webinar, but you never actually watched it. Here's all the information again in case you can't find it or just forgot about it. That happens. If you're not interested anymore, I would also include kind of an unsubscribe link. And if they unsubscribe, cool, let them off of that list. If they don't and they still don't take action, you can check in again with kind of a slightly different email in 60 days, 90 days, etc. You can also use this list later for if you do want to throw in a live webinar here and there. Maybe you're getting the itch and you're like, okay, I want to present this live a couple times a year just to get some face time in with my audience. You can directly market to that list and say, hey, I know you didn't watch the pre-recorded version, but I wanted to send you a personal invitation to join me live where you can ask me all your questions face-to-face and we'll have a great time. That kind of gives you a shortcut of a list of people who might be interested to join you live if they aren't taking action on a pre-recorded version. The third automation we are going to talk about takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of finesse, but I promise it's going to be so worth it. So what we're doing here, we're on the other side taking that list of people who did watch and we're going to further segment. Now, I like to segment it into people who watch 0 to 25%, people who watch 25 to 75%, and then people who watch over 75%. You can set that up any way you want with any kind of benchmarks, but that's just my personal preference. It only gives me 3 options. It's not too hard. So with this, what I would do is set up, I will say this is going to be a little harder if you're using a video embedded on a landing page. This is mainly going to be for those people who are using a webinar software that's going to allow them to track these type of metrics. So again, very similar setup. We're going to use either the direct integration or Zapier to get the information from one place to another and add these tags based on their engagement. So you'll have those 3 tags or however many you want to set up. That's going to start, again, just to segment this list down and down and down and down so you can have super nailed in marketing no matter where they are on their journey. For the first option, so those 0 to 25% people, I would invite them again to watch the webinar. So send them an invitation. And then if, let's say, after 7 to 10 days, they still don't watch it, go ahead and send them a new email that says, hey, I know you watched a little bit of this. Life gets in the way. I totally get it. Here's a recap in written form if that's easier for you. That way they have the option to get the high points and the really big points that you were teaching without having to sit through an hour, 2 hour long webinar. Then for those 25 to 75% people, and even kind of the 75 to over 100% people, I'd send them a recap email too. Give them the high points. Tell them, hey, I really appreciate that you joined me. Here are all the big things we talked about. And then invite them to ask questions and give feedback. Invite them to engage. So all throughout any of these automations, what you'll notice is that these automations start to segment your list so that they are engaged with you throughout the process, no matter what they're doing. And you only have to set it up once. That's the beauty of it. It's engaging for you. So from there, you're going to be able to segment out, okay, these people have consumed enough of my content to be ready for a sales sequence. That's usually going to be your 25% and uppers. However, with the proper introduction, let's say you have like a nurture sequence that are going to those people that watched between like 0.1% and 25%. Maybe you nurture them a time or two, and then you can send them the sales sequence. But really, it's going to be those people who have watched over 25%. You'll have the ability to send them an invitation to. Those are our 3 we're going to talk about, but I want to add one little note here too. In all of this, I know it seems like kind of a lot to set up at the beginning. It can be. It's really not that hard if you have the right teacher, I promise. So in all of this, it's very... Sammy, fuck. Shami. Okay. All right, those are the 3 automations, but I wanted to make a quick little note as to why these are important and the benefit that you can get from it. So I know it can seem a little overwhelming to set up, and it can be, but the benefit, it far outweighs the frustration here, because this is going to allow you to get data from your webinar. We all know you put a webinar out there, a lot of the times you can see, okay, people are watching, people are not watching. This entire automation series is asking for feedback through the process. It's supporting them where they are, and it's allowing you to see, okay, this is where people are kind of dropping off, not only inside your webinar, but inside the back end of what's going on, so that you can use that information to make adjustments and improve as you go. So even though it's an evergreen webinar, you can still make some tweaks and changes so that you can continually improve as you go. Now, the last little note I have here is if you are interested in automating your webinar further, or you liked any of the stuff that I just said about all these automations, be sure to join us for our live workshop. It's happening April 27th, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're going to be talking about these automations, exactly how we set them up. And then we're also going to give you our little spell book for a step-by-step guide on how you can set them up in any platform. So this is going to work for Kajabi, ClickFunnels, ActiveCampaign, FG Funnels, pretty much anything you're working with. We will be able to guide you on how to set up these automations inside of those softwares. It is linked below. It's called Webinar Wizardry, and we hope you'll see us there.